Hey guys, Katrina back with another part of my life. The longer I do this, the less I feel like I need to. Um, I'm still going to do it since I started it. Maybe it'll help someone out. Maybe it won't. I don't know. But anyway, we're just going to get right into it. I left off right wherever my grandmother got custody of us. Um, Whenever she got custody of us, I'm gonna try not to read so much because I do remember this. It's just I lose my place whenever I'm actually talking about it instead of reading it off the screen. But whenever she got custody of us, she started buying us all kinds of stuff. She was, I don't know, it's almost like she was a grandparent. You know, she never got to be our grandparent before. My dad made sure that we stayed away from her, that we stayed away from all my mom's family. And so I got more shoes than I could have wore before I grew out of them. You know, I got all kinds of clothes that I actually wanted instead of clothes that my mom had been given and had been stored in an old freezer in the backyard and smelled funny, looked funny, you know, probably 10 years old by the time I was big enough to be able to wear them. But there was one time. Oh, also my grandmother, whenever I went to go live with her, she started trying to get us active. My brother got to do football and baseball. She really liked baseball, so she really pushed my brother to do it. I got to do gymnastics and dance, and turned out that it was something that I wanted to do. So I ended up being very good at it. Um, Now I've always been a quick learner, but whenever it's something you enjoy, you just if you can't figure it out, you figure it out. You know what I mean? So there was one of my brother's baseball games that I had seen the Bohannons at, and there was a pole close to the bleachers, and I seen the mom sitting there, and whenever I walked up, and I just kind of hid behind the pole. Well, it wasn't long till she recognized my grandmother from the church service whenever they were looking for churches, and she had went over and started engaging my grandmother in conversation. And they kept motioning over towards where I was at and looking in my direction, so I knew that they were talking about me. Um, Whenever I seen this woman, it was almost like I'd seen my dad. Like I really just wanted to leave my body. I didn't want to have anything to do with her. I wish I could have just disappeared in that moment. Unfortunately, life don't work like that. So, um, after I seen her, I wanted to leave, and my grandmother was like, "Oh, you need to stop acting like that. I don't know what's gotten into you, all this kind of stuff, you know." And I just kept being adamant, like, "Let me just go sit in the car," and she wouldn't let me. So let me see where I'm at on this. Whenever we were leaving, I asked her what the mom had said about me, and she said nothing and wouldn't. Every time I would try to bring up the conversation, it wasn't. I only brought it up a couple times, but I really wanted to know because I knew the mom had a tendency of lying, and for some reason, I just always rubbed her the wrong way. So I wanted to know what she was saying, and at that time in my life, like I actually cared what people said about me. Now I just don't really care. It doesn't change who I am. Someone's opinion of me doesn't change who I really am. And whether you take the time to get to know me or not, not everyone is gonna rub everyone the right way. There's gonna be some conflict somewhere. Even the most giving, loving, appreciative people, you wonder why this person that would never hurt a fly got murdered. It's because they rubbed somebody the wrong way. So, just it doesn't matter how good you try to be, there's just going to be those people out there. And at that time, I didn't understand that. I only understood that there was people like my dad, and then there was people like me. And I didn't really know what that meant at the time, but basically, that is me seeing someone that does you wrong, and then you're their victim. So it took me a long, long time to get that, out of something that I still have trouble with it. My dad recently contacted me, so I feel like I'm almost being sunk back into that I'm his victim thing. And I know this is an average size guy, but my memory of him isn't an average size guy. I was a little girl, so he is this big monster that I can't defend myself from. But Our granddad, my dad's dad, he was allowed visitation, and we went to go spend a Christmas break with him. I noticed a lot of tension in between my mom's family around this time. He promised us a great life if we ever wanted to go live with him. You know, that he would buy us all these things, that he would try to make us as happy as possible. He never said he was sorry for what my dad did, but you can tell it hurt him. I didn't believe the bad things that my dad had said about my granddad. You know, he claimed that the reason why he was so messed up and warped in the head was from his dad. Um, my mom's family felt that he had to get his craziness somewhere, and he wasn't really around his mom that much. So that must have been where he was getting it from. You know, it had to be a male figure that taught him these things to do. So I don't remember my granddad ever doing anything inappropriate to me or bad to me or even punishing me for that matter. Um, there was only, oh, hold on. I was never afraid of him like I was my dad. He had a nice house. It had an in-ground pool. I had recently learned how to swim, so I was very fascinated with the whole, swimming pool thing and all that, so I was just like, man, I wish I could come live here. He had a barn with all kinds of like different birds in them, like ducks, chickens, geese. It was crazy. And he had paddle boats in a lake, so it was really nice. Um, One of my uncles lived with him. His name was Richard. He was like my favorite uncle. It turns out since I was very little, he had a habit of spoiling me, and I guess receiving any kind of affection from anyone just really made me, no matter the type of person, it just really drew me to that person. I had another uncle on my mom's side that they didn't really approve of, but he was one that was always nice to me, always pleasant. He was adopted, um, understood the foster care, understood what it was like to be mistreated. He was mistreated by his real parents, and he just, I don't know, it was almost like we just connected. And I guess he just seen a lot of himself in me. And I feel this way, with Richard because Richard wasn't treated the best. He was a little hefty. Um, you know, 30 years ago, well, I would say more like 40, 50 years ago, how you did, people didn't treat their kids the way that they do now. Now they, oh, don't spank them, try different forms of punishment other than, using force. Back then it wasn't like that. So him being a little bit heavier, he was picked on a lot. His parents pointed it out to him, so I guess he could just see that in me, that hurt little girl. But my grandmother, she was living in a house that she got with her first marriage, and it was run down. My uncle claimed ownership of it, but he wasn't the owner of it. Her only son, and he she got a second, or she had a second house from her second marriage. She outlived both of her husbands, and the second house, it was nice. It had three lakes. It was big. There was enough room for me and my brother to each have our own bedroom, with no problem. But the son, her stepson, felt like he was the one entitled to that. So supposedly he was very ugly to my grandmother, scared her off the property, and attained, I don't know if it was ownership. I don't know if she signed it over to him, but there was also a car lot that she rented out, like, and she watched a bunch of children, so she didn't need money. But he ended up getting her to leave the property and handing it over to him. So I was kind of mad with my grandmother because she had the opportunity to give us something similar to what my granddad had, and she chose not to. Or she chose to just give it to somebody, but yet she would constantly tell me, oh, you shouldn't let what happened to you, or you shouldn't let what your dad did to you ruin your life. I can see how you're going down the wrong path, all this. So I would throw it in her face because I didn't understand. You just let somebody run all over you and then you handed them a reward for it. So what's the difference in what I'm doing and what you're doing? And she didn't really take too kindly to this. It would really get up under her skin, but I didn't see any difference in it. And I was very angry that I had to live after my uncle decided that he needed to move back into the house, that his job had ended for some odd reason. He got transferred or something. So he needed to live in the house because he wasn't going to live in a trailer. And the only thing available to my grandmother at that time without her having to pay, mortgage or rent or whatever was my mom's old trailer that I lived in with my parents. And this really infuriated me. It's like you let a stepson run you off of one property and then you let your own son do it to you again. And now I have to live at the same place I was tortured and molested. And I became so angry at that. I just couldn't understand. And my uncle was saying, "Oh, I'm not living under the same roof that evil man did. You can go there." And it's like, that's supposed to be your mother. You're supposed to love and care for her. Why are we having to do this and you're too good for it? It just really rubbed me the wrong way and it really pissed me off. So, oh, we went to my granddad's for Christmas, and we begged my granddad to let us stay up to see my Uncle Richard. And as soon as he came through the door, we both jumped up out of my granddaddy's chair, and he grabbed both of us. He had one of us in one arm and one of us in the other. And my brother was kind of hefty, so I know he weighed a lot. And I mean, I wasn't a small little girl anymore, so you could tell he was kind of struggling with it. But he was so happy to see us, he started crying. He told us that he was happy that we were safe, and he told us to never forget that he loves us so, so much. He told us that it was getting late and that tomorrow we could play on his computer. And then he put us to bed. The next day, we couldn't wait for him to get home. As soon as he got back from work, all we didn't even let him get in the door to get anything to eat. We started bugging him right away, like, "Oh, when are we going to play the computer? When are we going to play the computer?" And he was like, "Oh, y'all chill out just for a minute. Let me get in the door. Let me eat something, and then we'll go play it." But that's all we could focus on was we're going to get to play on a computer. And he had a lot of cool games that would, like, I don't know, these little sticks and stuff that you can move and, make the character move through mazes and stuff. I'm 33, about to be 33, so this was a long time ago. And we sat in front of the computer and we played the game for a couple hours. Um, if I'd have known that was the last time I was going to see this man alive, I would have chose to talk to him a little bit more. Instead, I just cared about fighting with my brother over whose turn it was and whether or not I felt like he was doing the game right. After a little while, he told us, let's put the game up, let's do something else, because it was just bicker back and forth, just fighting, slapping. Um, After a little while we were there, I tried to tell my granddaddy why I told on my dad. He told me we couldn't talk about those things right now, but then one day there would be a time and a place. I felt like he was mad at me for telling on him. A few months after the trial, he showed up without notice passing through. He was taking his wife to the mountains, and it made my grandmother very angry. He told us he was on his way north and that he had tried calling, but nobody had answered. He told my grandmother he didn't want to impose, but it had been a while since he had seen us. They talked for a little bit in private, and then he turned up, and then he came, and he told us that he had to go. He seemed really bothered and like he wanted to cry. Every other time he would come to see us, he always spent a good amount of time with us and not talking to adults. I didn't understand why this was so different. My grandmother said he was in a hurry to go on vacation without us. That if he cared so much, why weren't we going with him? Why didn't he, take us with him for us to experience good things too? Instead, it's always about him, and he's just like my dad. This made me angry. She talked about how he only came by to rub it in our face, that he was taking his wife to go do stuff that we weren't able to do. I knew what kind of person my granddad was, and never got the chance to tell him I don't hold anything against him that my dad did to me. I never got to tell him that I was sorry and how I had no other choice. He knew my dad wasn't nice to us, but I really don't think he had any idea the extent of torture that his son was putting us through. When I was a lot younger, we'd went to my granddad's house staying for a little while. We were sleeping in the floor with my parents, and about the third night or so, I just got really sick of sleeping in the floor. And I started bugging my granddad to let me sleep with him. I had another uncle that was living there at the time, Billy, but he was, I don't really remember what was going on him during that time. I know he was kind of a young adult. He was like in his last few years of high school. So sometimes he was there, sometimes he wasn't, and it was like, oh, you can't go in Billy's room and mess with Billy's stuff, So I had just bugged my granddad about sleeping with him, and he also worked at the hospital, so he was going to have to be up pretty early. And I promised him that we weren't going to keep him up, we weren't going to bug him. Well, my brother, he wanted to sleep with him too, and during the night I had to get up and go to the restroom. And whenever I got up to go, like, I got to the point where I was sitting down on the toilet, and he tried to come help me. And I might have been 3.5, 4, somewhere around there. I wasn't in school yet, and I didn't go to pre-K, so I was still pretty young, but all I could think of whenever he came in there was, oh no, you're one person that I love and that hasn't done this to me, and I don't want you to. So I started yelling no. And he came in the bathroom. He asked me if I needed help, and I yelled at him no. And he came into the bathroom anyways where I was at. He was standing at the door, and then he just came in. I just completely flipped out on him. I started screaming, I started crying, I started yelling. I begged him not to have sex with me. And he just stood there and he looked at me like, what the hell? You could see the fear and the shock in his eyes. My mom heard the yelling and she came to see. He couldn't even explain to her what happened. When my mom asked what was wrong, I couldn't speak. I was just terrified that he was about to do to me what my dad did. And I didn't understand why I was so scared of him then. She turned to my granddaddy, and he shook his head and said he didn't know what was wrong. That he came in to help me, and I just started flipping out on him. After the incident, my granddad, he kind of distanced himself from me. I think he was scared that I might have claimed that he did something to me that he didn't. I think that whole thing just really scared him. I don't think he quite knew what to make of it. I mean, what do you say to a little kid that's begging you not to molest her or rape her? Somebody who shouldn't even know what those words are or know what the action is. I just wanted to tell him I was sorry for that. And that I knew in my heart that he wouldn't have hurt me. At the trial, they told me I had to tell the truth, even if I had not told the truth before. I didn't have a problem telling the jury about the things I lived through with my dad, but there was one in particular question that came up again, and it was one that I had lied about whenever I had previously given my statement. The one I avoided for a reason. I wanted to lie so bad, but I knew I couldn't. And that day was the first day I told the truth about it. Before letting go of the truth, it felt my lungs and my heart were going to explode. I could barely breathe. My palms became clammy. I started to hear my heartbeat so loud in my ears. All the loud noise made me sick to my stomach and dizzy. I couldn't even hear myself answer the question. It was so loud. As soon as I said yes, all the build up pressure and pain that I had left my body. I mean, a lot of people now, I mean, basically, I had a panic attack while I was giving my testimony in court. You know, that's some crazy stuff. After the trial, both my parents were put in prison. I didn't understand why my mom had to go too. I see my mom as his victim. I didn't see her as someone who had did anything wrong to me. My mom was my grandmother's last child, so it was her baby. Um, After my mother's incarceration, my grandmother became very angry, taking it out on us. Um, Don, my brother, he was treated special by my dad for being a boy, for being the man, for being his lucky charm, I guess. And with my grandmother, the tables turned. The testimonies that were given in court, the one that really saved my mom from basically getting the same sentence as my dad was my testimony. My brother, they didn't feel that his was reliable enough. We'll continue later. Bye.